Crop wild relatives. The definition, according to Maxted et al. From 2006 for crop wild relatives is the following. A crop wild relative is a wild plant taxon that has an indirect use derived from its relatively close genetic relationship to a crop. This relationship is defined in terms of the crop wild relative belongings to gene pools 1 or 2 or taxon groups 1 to 4 of the crop. And then there is an explanation of what is these different taxon groups. Definition. Crop wild relatives are plants that can be used for food, fodder, medicine, spices, ornamental purposes, or forest plants that has a social or economical value. Also fiber plants go in under this. To them belongs also plants that has an industrial value. Besides fiber, then also oil. About 79% is estimated that of European and Mediterranean Sea area plants belong to this category. Are crop wild relatives important? Crop wild relatives are important to farm environment and from cultural traditional point of view. For example, they may grow in semi-natural farming habitats. They keep up a healthy ecosystem. It's important to protect them and use them in a sustainable way so that we can keep up our food production, food security and environment. Russian researcher Nikolai Vavilov used their importance in the beginning of the 20th century when he noticed that they can be used to change the genetic characteristics of a plant. Crop wild relatives have for a long time been used in breeding, and by using them, plant production characteristics and qualities have been improved and developed. How has crop wild relatives been used? There has happened crossbreeding between cultivars and crop wild relatives as long as we have had agriculture. Plant breeders have used crop wild relatives in breeding wheat, corn, rice, oats, potato, yams, and vegetables. The amount of protein and vitamin content has been increased in medical plants by using crop wild relatives. Here we have a really nice map showing where are the so-called original places for our cultivated crops. So if we start to take a look at region 1, which is in China and Japan, you can see that soybean, rice, millet, bamboo, orange, tea, mustard and peach have an orange in this area. If we then look at Indochina and Indonesia, you can see that banana, sugarcane, grapefruit, also bamboo, coconut, rice, yam and mango comes from these regions. So you can see that some plants, they are like have their homes in different regions. From Australia, we get the macadamia nut. Then from the Hindustan region, we have also rice, banana, also sugarcane, cucumber, chickpea, mango, bean, eggplant, mustard, and citrus fruits. Let's continue then to region 5, Central Asia. Here is the origin of wheat, grape, apricot, pear, onion, pea, bean, rye, apples, plum, melon, carrot, spinach, and walnut. So many of our daily eaten products we can find in these regions as an origin. Then let's go to Near Eastern region, region 6 on the map. Here we find also wheat and barley, also rye, lentils, grapes, almonds, melon, figs, pistachio nut and pea. We continue our travel to region 7, Mediterranean region. From here we have wheat, oats, olive, beetroot, radish, lettuce, fava bean, grape, cabbage and celery. In the African region we have also wheat, millet, yam, coffee, sorghum, teff, oil palm and okra. Region 9. Now we are in the northern parts of Europe. From this area we have hops, pear, chicory, apple, cherry and lettuce. There is one bush that is not mentioned here on this list, and I have a feeling that also gooseberries have their origin in this area. So let's continue to region 10. Now we go to South American region, and of course here we find the potato, sweet potato, cassava, tomato, pineapple, lima bean, groundnut, cacao, squash and papaya, all used by the Indians in the mountain areas of Southern America. Let's then go to Central American and Mexican region. Here we have maize, potato, pepper and chili, French bean and squash as well. And from North America we have sunflower, blueberry, Jerusalem artichoke. So yeah, blueberries we have a lot also in northern parts of Europe. So these maps are made in such a way that you find out where the genetic diversity is the highest, and based on that then you try kind of to tag the area, or it's assumed that where you have the greatest genetic diversity, these are the areas where the plant has been occurring, or the so-called hotspots or origin of the plants. It's about on the same issues, and for example for Hindustan there is a little bit longer map on different kinds of plants, and so basically these two maps are similar, but the source is a little bit different. This Latin map here that we see now is a little bit newer, at least by looking on the source. Here you can see how we have changed as humans, corn or maize, from the very small tensine, the wild relative of the corn, how it has been developed into bigger and bigger and very diverse. You have blue corn, red corn, yellow corn, white corn, all different kinds of colors of corn you can find. Most often we are used to see the yellow corn because those are industrially produced, but there is really a huge variety of different types of corn for different uses. The fava bean or broad bean, it is a very old cultivar, and I just have two pictures here to show you how they can look like. To the left we have Aunus bean, it's an old Finnish bean, and to the right you can see an Estonian heritage bean, Gerda, from the island of Vormsi. So some of the seeds, they are immediately very dark. So when you open up the pod, then it's already lilac and dark, the seed. Even if fava beans or these broad beans, they tend to go dark also by age. So if you keep them in your storage too long, then the color may turn really dark. If you take a look at how this bean is connected to the pod, so where it was connected to the pod, there is a kind of small eye on the bean, and these small eyes are different in color and in shape. So, for example, from this Gerdas broadbean, the researcher at the Plant Research Institute in Estonia had a look on it, and they could then see that here actually was like crossings with several different types of beans in this mix. This kind of different color mixes in broad beans, of course, can have also aroused because it's cross-pollinated, and you should have like 1 kilometer between these different kinds of sort in order not to get them cross-pollinated. So another thing is that as I have been told from southeastern parts of Finland, where is this broad bean cultivation area used to be, the women were cultivating different colored broad beans together as like one, but afterwards when they, for example, were making soups, they could pick out only the white one because the white one has a milder taste, whereas these dark ones have more antioxidants in them and they are more stronger in their taste. So even if it may seem a kind of mess with different types of these beans together in one pot, in one plot when you cultivate them, then afterwards in the use in kitchen there could have been made selections, so they use different color for different types of food. Example, we have to the left we have Avena fatua, a weed, and to the right you can see black and yellow oats. So also the diversity in oat has been very big. Not only are there different colors, there are today, or let's say 100 years ago, still we were separating white, yellow, black and brown oats. And then they can have this panicular, the upper part where you can see the seeds here on the photo. It can be different. Some are so that the panicular is looking like a pyramid. Some are so that the small arms goes out to both sides, and others have so that they go all out to one side. And the one to the right, you can see that they stay pretty close to each other up. No? So just by looking on them, you can already see if there is some kind of diversity. Back for a moment again to European crop wild relatives. So the following cultivars have crop wild relatives in Europe: oats, beet, apple, meadow fescue, and white clover. For example, in the Baltic countries, Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania, there is quite a lot of wild apple trees. And there is also a huge amount of, unknown apple trees that are perhaps from seeds being occurring. So these are just some of them. There are more plants. And then there are some smaller plant species also that have been developed, taken into use in Europe, like wolfsbane, asparagus, salad, and common sage. Then more in the southern part of Europe. So when we talk about crop wild relatives, they are not the same. They are different in different regions globally. That is good to keep into mind. You can see the wild salad, how it looks like, with these tiny, tiny small leaves, and what human has developed it into huge, nice green leaves to eat. Have a look on another plant. To the left you have the wild beet, and to the right you have what we have developed it into. So they are so different that you wouldn't even assume that it's the same plant. And preservation. There has been made a lot of research on crop wild relatives lately, especially at Birmingham University in England by Nigel Maxted. There is also a global treaty on protection of crop wild relatives. The reason to this is that many industrialized countries are discovering these crop wild relatives and these genetically valuable plants in, for example, Africa and South America, but also Asia, and using them without giving any compensation to these countries where they have been growing in. And it's not only a question about that they are picking up wild plants, but the plants may also be growing in such habitats where local farmers have been keeping up these habitats, so they have enabled these plants to grow in them. And this is behind this plant treaty. So there has been made then rules for how you can use plants and how you should inform the locals if you are using them. There was actually a big discussion on the first seminar on crop wild relatives that was kept in 2009 in Sweden at Nordgen concerning these plants that perhaps are growing in the meadows of a farmer. So one example that was brought forward was that a farmer had this semi-natural area and he was only grazing it, so his cattle were grazing it. And then there was a biologist from a university in Sweden that came to that area without the knowledge of the farmer. So it was not like agreed upon that this person could walk on his areas. We have these everyone's rights in the Nordic countries, so actually he could walk there. But what he did was he collected plants of viola species. And he was sending them to a laboratory in England where they, it was a medicine laboratory, where they then took different active substances from these plants and actually patented them. So the biologist was also at this seminar and that had done it. And he said that why should the farmers be paid for grazing this area and keeping up this habitat? He said the farmers cannot use it to anything. So the farmer cannot use the plant to anything. It's just growing there in his fields due to the fact that he is keeping his animals grazing the area. And we had really long discussion about this, and should the farmer get compensated or should he not get compensated. So the biologist from the university was of the point of view that no, he should not get any compensation because he cannot do anything with the plant anyway. So it's kind of unnecessary for him, and he couldn't see the benefit why we should share this income that there will come out of this plant, because the job to get these active substances for the plant from the plant was done by the laboratory in England. And there is still then going on these questions concerning this, and this is what this plant treaty is about. For example, if you go up to Lapland, you are not in Finland, you are not allowed to pick plants in this Lappish area, because these plants, they belong to the Same people who live in that area. So if you started to collect something there, even if it wasn't endangered or it wasn't like restricted in any other way, you cannot do it, because the plant genetic resources, they belong to the Same people up in the north. So there are in these treatments that have been made, there are these several of areas where you cannot go freely into the areas and collect plants in order to use them for medicinal purpose or for whatever purpose, and kind of try to earn some money on it, make a business out of it. So in the start, when we started the discussion about crop wild relatives in Sweden, it was suggested that the plants could be divided into 3 groups. One for endangered plants. This would also include relict plants. I will come back to that. And forest trees, one group, and then these crop wild relatives as the 3rd group. The next step was to work out lists of plant species, because it was difficult for people to understand the connection of these crop wild relatives to our cultivated plants that we have today. And it was politically, it was wanted to make a kind of short list of perhaps 100 plants or less plants, so that in order to explain for the politicians why this is important. Protection and preservation, still, it has also been discussed how we could arrange the conservation of crop wild relatives. And one suggestion has been to do it in existing national parks and nature reserves. That's one possibility. So they have already perhaps these plants in this area, and it could just come as a new task for them to take care of these areas. Let's take an example. Maybe somewhere in the national park there is growing white clover or red clover, like red forest clover. And then it could be put in the management plan that the people in the national park also would see that this area is not overgrown with trees, but it could be cut down, for example, regularly. Or even if not cut down, then just see that there is not growing trees in that area, so that this habitat of that plant will disappear. But in addition, it was also discussed that some of the plants, they do not grow in existing national parks and nature reserves, especially in Northern Europe, because in Northern Europe we have a lot of forestry biotopes that are under nature protection, but we have very few inhabited places that are under national parks territory. So, for example, agricultural landscapes, these semi-natural landscapes especially, there are growing a lot of crop wild relatives in those, and they are not parts of any national parks usually. So you should have to, from country to country, estimate then in which way could you, in the best way, take care of these crop wild relatives. Also, the use of these plant genetic resources is very important. So the collection of seeds, their storage, and also the distribution of the seeds, so that people could actually also cultivate perhaps these crop wild relatives. Many of them can be used for food, for example, or spices. So some few words about crop wild relative habitats. For example, wild strawberries on the picture down to the left, oregano on the picture down in the middle, and St. Johan's wort on the picture down to the right are growing in semi-natural areas which usually are grazed by farmers' cattle or other farm animals. So semi-natural areas should be managed so that these plants can continue to grow in those areas. If we stop using these semi-natural areas, there will not be these plants anymore. So we could discuss, could the farmer in the future get support for taking care of these habitats? A big project in Europe running for some years ago, Farmer's Pride, and Finland got its own strategy as one of the first countries in Europe. There were a few others as well. I think there was 3 countries in the beginning that got their own first strategy for crop wild relatives. And Finland was chosen because Finland is at the edge of the agricultural cultivation sector from a global perspective. So several plants may have rare subspecies in Finland that are valuable for the genetic diversity of Europe as a whole. There is circa 2,500 tree vascular plants in Finland, and out of these, 1,905 were selected for the list. It means that 76% of our vascular plants in Finland are crop wild relatives and potential edible or in any other way usable plants for humans. The plants were assessed according to their threatened value and use, and 205 of these were prioritized for conservation. As I told you earlier, it's important to make a shortened list because the list is so huge that it's nearly everything is a potential plant to eat in our nature in Europe. And to the right, you can see then the report, the National Crop Wild Relative Strategy Report for Finland, which is only written then in English. Jump into a sub-chapter of crop wild relatives. As I told before, these relict plants, which are most interesting plants, they are very old cultivated plants or plants that perhaps just the seeds were carried with the humans and they arrived together with the humans. One of these in Finland are chives, and another one is caraway. Both are old plants that you find in semi-natural habitats. The chives, they are growing on the coasts of Finland in these very rocky areas. If you move in the archipelago of Finland, you can see them there growing wild. The relic plants, yes, there have been very little studies on this in Finland. And most studies on relic plants have been undertaken in Denmark. Usually seed-save organizations are interested in this topic, and in Denmark, Tino Hjort Bjerregaard has mapped and managed also relic plants on the island of Bornholm, and they have been also developing different kinds of menus for restaurants using these very old relic plants. In Google, you can search with the search terms relict plants, relicta planter, it's the Danish name, ancient plants, ancient newcomers, or archaeophytes, and get more information about it. I'm sure you find some also in your own region. These relict plants are often endangered, and you can find relict plants near old castles, monasteries, old settlements, and farms, also close to old harbors and near churches. To the right, you can see one crop wild relative in Finland is the star flower. It has been used as spices and it's a very good honey producing plant, so good pollinator plant also. We are not going to take a deeper look on the management of crop wild relatives, but Farmer Pride's project have made guidelines for the management of crop wild relatives. So maybe if you are more interested, then you could read their report, their management guidelines about this. What I wanted to bring forward is the stakeholders concerning crop wild relatives. So we have the farmers here in one corner, the farmers and the breeders, the agricultural sector. They are interested in crop wild relatives, and they are a part of, as a stakeholder. Then we have the environmental and agricultural agencies, and usually they are kind of in the middle, and they have been developing these national action plans. They are thinking about the use, they are doing the coordination, and they have also the data information. Then we have those landowners again, which can be farmers and usually are farmers. It may be also the state, some places that are doing the progress monitoring, and they are a part of the participatory conservation. So if somebody is going to monitor something on the land, and if it's a farmer's land, then of course he's included in the process. Another big part is the science sector. The science sector is very interested in these crop wild relatives because you can find the different substances that could be used in medicines for humankind. So this conservation, prioritization, these different kinds of standards and technical advices you get from the science sector. And it's important to remember also that we need also to have a backup strategy for these crop wild relatives. And that's why also the gene banks nowadays are interested in them. Then we have up in the up left corner the policy and the decision making and the funding. And they are of course very essential because without funding we will not get anything done. And that's why it's important to have this red part in the middle down here. We need the public awareness and education about crop wild relatives in order to get it to reach to the policy level, in order to get funding and in order to get things, so to say, rolling on. At the end of this presentation, you find literature recommended to read and sources and different kinds of important places to visit if you're interested in crop wild relatives.